tonight. We've got 3 for the price of 1. The Scottish Wildlife Trust, we've probably all heard in the press, the Scottish Wildlife Trust have acquired this new reserve, or new bit of estate near Ullapool, Inverbroom. And so Abi, there's the names there, Simon and Billy are going to talk about what their plans are for the Scottish Wildlife Trust on this new reserve, and sort of work in the wider Highlands as well. So thank you very much for coming, and I'll pass over to you guys. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Abi Ball, Reserves Manager. Yeah. So first of all, can you hear me? Okay. Right. I'll shout if I drift off and you can't hear me again, because that might well happen. But yeah, thank you very much for inviting us.
Do you want the lights out?
Yeah, can do. Yeah. 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 So yeah, thanks very much for inviting us. So how we're going to do this, so I'm going to do a bit of an introduction, an overview to the Northwest Reserves, and a couple of things that have been happening recently, Benmore particularly. Then I'll pass over to Simon, who will introduce Inverbroom, and then Billy will sort of talk through the planned surveys for the next year. Okay, so in terms of the wider Northwest region, we extend from the Northern Peninsula with Rahoy Hills, which is an area, I think it's sort of 1,600 hectares. We have a seasonal ranger down there, and it includes part of the land is owned by the Wildlife Trust, and part is under a management agreement from our Tornish estate. And it includes Ariellis Wood, which is Atlantic oak woods, and then sort of up through acid grasslands up to the basalt cliffs and rocks with the Arctic alpine interest. So it's a really lovely reserve if you're not familiar with it. We also have involvement with the Isle of Egg, and since the Isle of Egg community buyout celebrates its 30th anniversary next year, and the Scottish Wildlife Trust were involved at the outset and have been a member of the Isle of Egg Heritage Trust since then. So on Egg we have a seasonal ranger, and supported by seasonal volunteers as well, so they do a lot of kind of sort of guided walks and surveys and infrastructure, sort of keeping the access infrastructure going. Then obviously we'll talk about Inverbroom within the talk. I'll talk about Benmore. Handa is a slight anomaly, so that's managed by the North East Reserves team in Scotland, and then we go up to Orkney, and there are 5 reserves on Orkney, which range from sort of heath to coastal grasslands and small islands. So I'm missing a photo's fallen off. What's happened there? Anyway, that's a shame. So that central photo is of Rahoy, and so yes, as I explained, it's sort of a mix of sort of woodland, acid grassland, heath, and then the Arctic alpine interest. The photo on the left is Hill of Whitehans on Orkney, which is a really important site for Scottish primrose. And then the photo here is of some volunteers sort of doing a beach clean on Egg. So those are the sort of things that get involved with on Egg. And the missing photo, unfortunately, was of basically Little Linger and Lingerholm, which are 2 of the islands on Orkney, which are important breeding colonies for grey seal, and also important for cormorant and fulmar as well. Oh, wow, okay, I didn't mean for that special effect, but thank you. So, yeah. Okay, so closer to home, Benmore, which I guess you'll probably be very familiar with, sort of circa 6,000 hectares, so it's obviously a large, well up until Inverbroom it was the Scottish Wildlife Trust's largest reserve. It includes obviously the sort of, it's a crofting estate, it's important to say, and it ranges from the sort of croftland up to the high hills, and also includes the Summer Isles mentioned there on the sides, including aisle listal. So Benmore Koyak itself has been in Scottish Wildlife Trust ownership since 1998. As I say, it's a crofting tenure and common grazings, so very much managed in partnership with the common grazings and the crofters. Diverse range of habitats, cropland to mountain tops, freshwater lochs to coastal islands, and really instrumental to management, or the wider sort of collaboration is part of the Koyak and Ascent Living Landscape, which you'll be very familiar with here. So obviously Koyak and Ascent Living Landscape Partnership meets sort of every couple of months, very, very active, really kind of strong collaboration and partnership working with a mix of ENGOs, private landowners and community ownership. In terms of the Scottish Wildlife Trust and our management at Benmore Koyak, central to that is sustainable deer management, and our deer management plan currently has the objective ecologically acceptable and sustainable populations of deer to facilitate the improvement in habitat condition of the wet and dry heath, and the re-establishment and expansion of native woodland, principally through natural regeneration, and also to manage impacts of deer on the croftland, which has been an issue in the last few years. Again, some of you might well be familiar with this, but one of the partnership projects, which was funded by the Nature Restoration Fund in September 2024, was the thermal drone survey. So I think it was perhaps the largest thermal drone survey at the time of the whole of the coal area, yes, it uses sort of a mixture of obviously heat detection and then very powerful optical zoom, and can identify species, sex and even the age class of the deer. So that provides really invaluable population data which we use alongside HIA results as well to inform our sort of deer management approach. Also, in terms of the deer management, is sort of central to our kind of ambitions and linked in with the community ambitions is the Community Deer Management Initiative. So again, through that funding package with the Nature Restoration Fund in autumn 2024, we sort of commissioned a report establishing a Community Deer Management Initiative. So that's helping to guide our thinking and development of the CDMI approach at Benmore Koyak, and it covered the development of a CDMI model, the best means of establishing community access to a deer larder, and looking at venison routes to market in terms of local accessibility of the venison. Particularly on Benmore Koyak this year, we have, in partnership, well, in close collaboration with CCDC and in partnership with Summerwells Enterprise, we've had a pilot deer management contract. So we've engaged a contractor who has carried out the deer management, but has also he's also provided training opportunities. So we held a community meeting inviting interested people to come along and register their interest to sign up to a training programme. And then there's been opportunities to do DSC1 training, certification, and also mentoring, hill mentoring alongside the contractor. So that's kind of that's where we are currently, but there are sort of ambitions to kind of further refine. As I say, it was a pilot project to kind of now with the partners to kind of reflect on how did that go, what have we achieved, and how to further refine and develop it moving forwards. The next topic I wanted just to touch on in terms of Benmore Koyak is peatland restoration. So that's again central to kind of our sort of ambitions for healthy peatlands, and we worked very closely with the Peatland Action Officer, who was kind of instrumental in designing the Phase 1 peatland restoration scheme. Again, this was in sort of strong collaboration and partnership with the Common Grazings Committee, you know, and without their support it just wouldn't have been possible. So this shows phase 1, and you can see, I don't know if you can make that out, but it was just under 140 hectares in extent, and comprised sort of almost 25 kilometres of reprofiling, so just under 3,000 dams and just under 190 surface funds. So it was within a drinking water catchment, so Scottish Water sort of were supportive as well, obviously in terms of the water quality benefits, and obviously kind of restoring degraded peat and the habitat benefits as well. So I've got a few photos which just show before and after. So here we're sort of seeing exactly the same sort of peat hag, sort of before and after reprofiling with the turfs. And again, another example of before and after. And I was amazed because I joined the Wildlife Trust in January last year, and this work had been going on over the winter and completed in February. So when I went up, it literally just completed, and just you could barely notice exactly where the work had happened. It was just incredible, really. So, and then examples of peat dams and stone dams where the peat is shallower. And then some nice bog pools as well. So where we're at the moment, we applied for a second phase. So this second phase pretty much sits alongside the first phase, slightly shallower peat in places. And we've applied for peatland action funding, and we're just sort of waiting to hear the outcome of that. And again, that would be again within sort of collaboration with the Common Grazings Committee. I think that is me. If I can pass over to Simon. If you want to.
Okay, yeah. Look at how this works. Hi everyone, I'm Simon Thomas. I joined Scottish Wildlife Trust in October. I've previously been at Cane Walls National Park, so my title is Operations Manager for North of Scotland, so I work under Abi, managing Michael, who was already with us, who's been working in Koyak for the last year or so, and at Inverbroom and all our other reserves in the north of Scotland. And I'm also managing various new people. So we've got Hannah, who's just started at Inverbroom this year, and I'm also managing the deer stalker at Inverbroom, and our ranger down at Raphoy as well. And I have recently moved to Inverbroom myself, and in the process of setting up an office there. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what we've got at the estate for people who've not been to the area. Some of you may, from the photos, realise that you've actually driven through the middle of it. As you can see, right, is this a pointer on here? Yes. So this is Braymore Junction here. So the main road from Ullapool to Inverness, and then the Dundonald Road, a bit that's called. So that's the famed Bothy. It's the road that goes straight across the moorland, essentially across a big flat bit.
Do you have much of Corrie Shallow?
No, we don't. That's in here, so that's the National Trust. So we're abutting that. So we're on the other side of the river, essentially. So this is the River Broom. So we have everything on the west side. Yeah. So as you drive along the road, when you look across, the stuff below you that's down the slope that you can't see isn't ours, but the stuff you see on the other side is. Yes. And there's a kind of popular car park around here where people go and either walk down the lock or up into the Fanix here. So that car park and that road is basically, yes, just on the estate. So it's 7,500 hectares. There's a lot of stuff there. From our point of view, we were a mystery donor, purchased this property and offered it to the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and it came with very little information really, so we are in the process of a project to find out what we've got and think about what we want to do with it. So the answer to lots of your questions will probably be, we're not sure yet, but we are in the middle of it. We now have all of these people working there, and we have lots of stuff going on this year which you will find out about. I've put together a couple of slides. In my head it falls into three main bits. So Strathmore, I guess what the Inverbroom Estate proper in terms of estate infrastructure, and there is lots of information written about Sir John Fowler and what he got up to when he built the Victorian estate, which is what we see there now in the Strath. So John Fowler, who owned Braymore, was responsible for the Forth Bridge. He was an engineer and did a lot of his trials of bridge building on Braymore Estate. So there's listed examples of buildings on the estate which are basically miniature versions of bridges that have been built elsewhere. So I guess probably the best known bridge is at Corrishallock Gorge for the people that visit there, but there's lots of others further down the river, some of which are now in a state of disrepair and not safe to use anymore because they're corroded, but we are interested in having a look at them and the condition of them and seeing what can be done with them. So in early days at the moment, it's obviously, as the Wildlife Trust, that we're not the experts in that, so there's other people who we will be looking at partnering with to do that. We've got 2 farmsteadings. There's a 11-bedroom lodge, which is it's hidden in the trees there, you can't actually see it. So that's this was managed as a sporting estate till we took it on. That's currently being renovated, ready to be rented out again as of this spring. There's 22 homes on the estate. It's residential properties. Several of us now live on there too. This is all stuff that we've taken on, and so we're working with the community up and down the Strath really. River Broom, so nice salmon river, runs down into Loch Broom where our land stops just short of the loch. And we've got a lot of the catchment, not the entire catchment, much of the catchment of the Broom. We've also got bits of the Dundonald catchment as well on the top of that. So along the Strath, it's pretty good farmland in terms of the Wildlife Trust's interest potentially, as it's thinking from a nature reserve perspective in terms of habitats. Probably the main ones are along the river corridor. There's wet woodland, it's more established, and there is, as you can see in this picture, lots of shelter belts that have been planted which are newer, but most of them are native woodland, not entirely, but with a bit of tweaking certainly can be. Then there's a kind of a third middle section that was known on the estate previously as the home beat, so I should call that here. So it rises up from the Strath, and then there's a big, relatively flat area of quite high moorland that goes across to the Dundonald Road. So a lot of that, as you can see in this drone picture at the top, is a relatively flat moorland with a mixture of heath and bog in it. There's lots of lochans all across it, and bog pools and areas like in here probably, which very recently used to be bog pools and lochans, and with a little bit of work could be again. There's what have we got in there? There is some interest in there. There's lots of bits that haven't been very well explored on there yet, but we've got in terms of bog species that I've had a look at. There's the Sphagnum austinii, Sphagnum fuscum, Sphagnum beothuc, which generally indicates as a good quality habitat that you'll get on nice bits in Assins that are still there on some of the bits. And in the lochans, I don't think anyone's actually done any surveys of the lochans yet, but there's definitely greenshanks nesting up on there, and we have a small population of black grouse which has been there about 5 years, very small at the moment, and there's this very small lek there. Along the edge, sort of where this flat area of moorland borders the strath that we had before, the steeper sides there. We've got lots of native woodland creation schemes that have been happening over the last 20 years that the previous owner has put in, that we will need to maintain and keep going. And they centre on, I guess, 5 deep wooded gorges that haven't been fully explored yet. One of them has had some surveying done in the past by Gordon Rotherow, particularly probably looking at bryophytes. Others have barely been explored at all. This one here I went into the other day. There's a fern called green spleenwort, which is normally an indicator of more sort of basic lime-rich conditions, which I'm surprised to find in an area that's generally all similar acidic rocks. And there's the Wilson's filmy fern, and there's things like the lungworts, lichens that you'd expect to find in old woodlands, all lurking in the very damp gorges here. So yes, they're all very nice, and there's a path that kind of goes along and captures them all. So definitely examples of the Atlantic rainforest lurking in those gorges. And we've got there's an area of, it's mostly the woodlands that we've got that aren't recently planted are mostly alder. There's an area of, I think, 60 or 80 hectares in between the gorges on the valley side that goes down into the bottom a little bit in the strath, which are obviously very old coppices that haven't been managed for a long time, so huge, great big old trees. So there's probably lots of interest in there that we've yet to find. There's some old hazel stools in there as well, but not a huge number, and a few oaks. There's historic woodland evidence of up on here, this very bare area of moorland. There's loads and loads of stumps on the surface in very shallow peat up there, and apparently until relatively recently there was actually quite a lot of woodland up there. There's also remnants of there's a farming community up there, and there's old records suggesting that this used to support a surprising number of cattle on here, so it probably used to look quite different and probably was more productive land until it became more degraded in recent centuries. And across to the other side of the road we have the catchment of Loch of Royne, which is 2.5 miles long. There's bothy at the top of it with a track that goes into the fisher fields. There's a track that runs along the side of the loch that lots of people use. Up above that, there's the land goes up to, you can see the summit of one Monroe there. There's another one up here, so our land goes up to the summits up there. There was some botanical records limited from there. There's some very old records, and I went on a BSBI trip there about 3 years ago up to the summits, which was kind of abandoned because of weather, but there was definitely some interest restricted to the cliffs on the higher bits where there's some more basic rocks in places up there, so a bit more diversity up there. There's 2 fragments of woodland on the cliffs here and up here, which some years ago have been fenced off, and again there's native woodland planting around the fragments of the old trees that are on the cliffs. So there's some interest still in there which we are looking to expand. There's huge amounts of blanket bog and wet heath, and some little bits of upland fen, I guess we call it, springs and things coming down off this ground. We think there might be some water voles still up there. There used to be old records of a big population of water voles around the loch, but we will hopefully find out. Billy will tell you more about surveys we've got going on this year. We have 2 SSIs on this land, which I haven't spent any time actually exploring SSI areas yet, but my memory is that they are for geological features. So those are the kind of the main bits of the estate that we've got. We've got rivers I've mentioned before. This is the only map we've got which isn't that easy to read. It kind of shows the black outline of the reserve. So along here is the River Broom comes up. So it follows our boundary, and then this is the Cooling is a tributary of the Broom, comes up to Loch of Royne there. So that kind of forms a big boundary of the estate that we have. This is the headwaters of the Dundonald River here in a big flat area here next to the road. It goes down to Dundonald that way. the different colours here. This is SEPA's assessment of condition of the rivers. So the Dundaln River all along is described as good, whereas the Broom, by the time it gets to the bottom, is described as in poor condition. I think the condition is probably to do with there being water abstraction and the river straightened for diverting around the estate when the estate was built, and lots of conifers all along the side of the valley here as well. I imagine that's probably what that's relating to. So we have an old report that was produced by the West Ross Fisheries Trust, which has given various options, things that can be done for improving the health of the river and improving the availability of places for salmon and trout to spawn in the Strath. We've been chatting to them recently about that because I don't think much of it has ever been implemented, so we'll be looking to revisit that. Okay, peatlands, I've been doing lots of walking around. We have peatland restoration planned at Inverbroom in an early stage. We're trying to come up with a 5-year plan over the course of this year to look at it will be this pink area here essentially. So the map up here, this is Nature Scott have kind of done national mapping of peatlands, which is showing different colours for different areas. Peatland pink and yellow essentially is blanket bog. So you can see that pretty much the whole of our estate is on this kind of scale of national scale mapping anyway, is showing as blanket bog, so there's certainly lots of it in all those areas. So yes, there's quite a lot of erosion as on typical blanket bogs all across the UK really, but I think that most of what we've got up on this bit that I've looked at looks easily restorable, perhaps in more easly so than perhaps the stuff we'll be looking at on Benmore Koyak, where what's left of the peat's probably quite shallow now and quite broken up. But from having the bits I've looked at on Inverbroom, I guess we've got lots of nice intact bits like this, where we've got areas where I guess the natural topography have made it harder for it to erode and it stayed wet. There's lots of lochans, there's lots of bog pools again, there's lots of good bog plants up there. I found the what seems to be the only extant Western Ross site for the small cranberry. First time I walked up there, it's not recorded anywhere currently in Western Ross, but Western Ross is slightly outside the envelope of where it's more of it's a Scandinavian species, I guess, really, which extends down into northeast Scotland. It's relatively scarce, and then I guess over on the west coast there's perhaps less of that continental climate.
Is that marked for carbon?
Yes,
Ooh.
yeah. Yeah. So I found one little plant of it, but our surveyor who was walking around mapping all the peat hags said he'd seen multiple other bits of it in that area, which is good, and it likes to grow on the top of the big old sphagnum hummocks, so the Sphagnum austinii, the rarest sphagnum that lives in the intact bits around the edge of these wet areas. My vision, I guess, for looking at this place is that there's lots of bits that look like this, which to me, all these bits just look like something like this that has had a bit of erosion and the water has drained out of it. And if we can move the peat and the turf around and stop where it's draining out of these bits, they will instantly look like this again. But maybe, when I say instantly look like that, they probably won't get all the species back instantly, but the water table would be back, and obviously if you're a wetland, the water table is the key thing really. Where they said this is in the middle of winter and it's already 3 or 4 feet below the surface, the water, there's a bit of water pooling on it in the summer, these obviously will dry out. So that's what we'll be looking to implement there. On condition that we manage to be successful in getting the Scottish Government's peatland restoration grants, I have to say, otherwise it will be a fundraising drive for that. So what have we been doing to date? We've been, starting off with looking what we've got on the estate, the infrastructure, which will include paths and walls and fences and all the building and everything. So yes, looking at health and safety, establishing our new office, which I'm in the middle of getting on with. We're still waiting for planning permission, but we are, moving our team from our tour office in Inverness to have it as our regional hub. So we'll have our office and our workshops for everybody there. we've been recruiting our team. Donald McKeever from Alt Bay is going to be our Inverbroom project manager, overseeing lottery funding that we've managed to get for doing a 5-year project to find out what we've got and draw up plans. Hannah's going to be Hannah Taylor is now living on site. She's what we call Natural Heritage Officer and is doing all the stuff on the estate management and public engagement and communications things. We'll be probably starting to see more of that. We need to have get our office up and established before we start reaching out. But that's over the next few weeks. That's all going to be happening. We still employ the stalker from the previous owner, so deer management has been ongoing. We, as I mentioned, there's a whole lot of forestry schemes of different ages, so we've been looking at what's been going on there, what condition everything's in, what the fences are like, and planning our ongoing management of the forestry to optimise that for wildlife. And yes, we've been busy preparing some volunteer opportunities over the last week. And yes, I haven't yet mentioned National Lottery Heritage Fund, who are funding the whole Inverbroom project and the team and lots of other things. So we are, I suppose, yes, we're calling it the Inverbroom 550 project. It's a 5-year project, but we have a 50-year vision, so 2 years of doing surveys, and then on the basis of those surveys we are going to be drawing up plans. We need to find out what we've got before we decide what our plans are going to be. Then 3 years of lots of implementation to try and set things on course. Yeah, so it's benefiting people and wildlife. Hopefully we're very much trying to embed ourselves into the local community and people who obviously live already on the estate and in the wider area, the Stratford and Ullapool. So I mentioned the project team that's on there. Yeah, so we have this grant, £745,000 for development phase grant awards, which is all for, pretty much all of it is for drawing up plans, which involves bringing in an awful lot of other people to help us as well, because we've got a lot of work to do over the next couple of years. So development stage, which will be yes, what we're up to for the next couple of years. So comprehensive ecological baselines, Billy is leading on getting all of that together. Production of habitat management, deer management, public engagement and access plans. So some of the management of the reserves kind of ongoing, stuff that's already happening, I'm just getting on with, but in terms of where we go, what we really want to do with the estate over the next 50 years, we're not rushing into making decisions, we're wanting to work out exactly what we've got and discuss with everybody who we can engage with to work out what's the best way of doing things going forward and who we want to be working with on it. So yes, field surveys for multi-year peatland restoration project are ongoing already, but still relatively early days. And we're doing a property options appraisal, which is going to be looking at the not inconsiderable infrastructure that we have and what's the best way to use it to help ensure that the trust is, I guess, sustainable financially, and that also fits in with the aspirations of everyone else in the area, and it is the best community asset that it can be. Right, that was me, I think. That's a quick race through what we've been doing, and I'll let Billy finish with chatting about surveys that we've got planned of wildlife, which is probably what everybody wants to hear about. So.
Hi everyone. So yeah, as Simon said, I'm the ecologist for the Inverbroom project, and yeah, the purpose of my role is to essentially re-establish the baseline for the site before we jump into the delivery phase next year. So I've got a whole suite of surveys planned, and I'm going to just run through a breakdown of them, give more detail one by one. This list is not exhaustive. We're certainly not limited by ambition, rather just capacity, because I am just one person. We are hoping to engage volunteers over the next year, and hopefully that will allow us to kind of expand our suite of surveys that we'll be doing. But kind of the three kind of big ones that we'll be focusing on are obviously the habitat surveys, which will involve an MVC survey of the full reserve, as well as botany and bryophyte recording, lichen recording, and then as Abi kind of laid out with Benmore Kayak, obviously deer will be a priority at Inverbroom as well. So we'll be carrying out woodland and dwarf shrub and blanket bog HIAs, and we've already had a couple of drone surveys done, one of which we're waiting to get some of the detail back on. And then one of my kind of main focuses that I'll be carrying out a lot of the work myself is all of the ornithology surveys. I've already kind of started with some of the rat surveys. I'm going to be up at the crack of dawn tomorrow for the first of the black grouse surveys. So yeah, and then we've also got all of the mammal survey work, some of which we'll be doing a lot of in-house, but then we'll also have a collaborative project with the Mammal Society. We've got electrofishing surveys, a suite of different invertebrate surveys, and then obviously surveying for any of the invasives that we have on site as well. So yeah, as I said, we'll be bringing on Ben and Alison Averis to do the MVC of the reserve. They previously did the MVC survey at Benmore Kayak, but that was about 25 years ago. So it's certainly one of the biggest MVC surveys that I've ever seen. So, and that will form a really strong basis for our habitat management plan moving forward into the delivery phase. In terms of botanical recording, as Simon kind of mentioned, there are a lot of interesting alpine plants and nationally scarce species present on site that have been recorded throughout the years. So we'll be looking to reconfirm those and kind of establish some long-term monitoring. The BSBI and National Trust will also be coming to do some recording for us as well. And then we've got a project with the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. They have an intern biologist who will be undertaking a long 3-month stint of survey work at Inverbroom as part of a project that she'll be running. Flora Bell is their name. And then we've got Gordon Rothero and Nick Hodgetts coming along to support that as well. In terms of just kind of existing data, because obviously I don't have a lot to show you just yet, perhaps I'll come back in a year's time and show you what I've actually found. But as part of these initial first couple of months of my time in the role has been doing a desk study, kind of again of all the existing information on the site. And one of the kind of most consistently recorded groups is obviously our botanical records. This map was pulled out by Duncan Donald, who's the VCR for the area, and yeah, as probably can't see super well, but quite a lot of monads on the site have very up-to-date records, but then there's whole other areas that have just never been recorded on before. But between 1972 to 2023, there's been kind of 13 quite significant recording efforts on the reserve, which we have all of the records for, which is brilliant. And there's about 341 species that have been recorded in total that we know of on the estate so far.
Those are 1 km squares, are they?
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, no,
No,
they're
they're
tetrans.
not.
Yeah.
10.
2.
2.
They're
Right.
Yeah.
Tetrans.
Tetrans, aye. Yeah, this includes 21 nationally rare or scarce species. Yeah, and just some of these are laid out here. As Sam said, yeah, our most recent recording effort was a BSBI field meeting in 2023 that recorded some brilliant species. I mean, the downy willow, for example, I think there was only 2 or 3 plants recorded in total, and that's down at the very southeastern kind of tip of the reserve. But yeah, there's other species like chestnut roach that have not been recorded since 1956. I'm hoping that's potentially just down to recording effort rather than that plant being absent.
Or flowering because
yeah.
it gets eaten.
Exactly. So But hopefully with the recording effort that we'll be going to this year, some of these species will be re-identified. Yeah, and there's some of the others as well. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of botanical interest on the site, and also as Simon highlighted as well, quite a lot of basic influence on the site, which we're still kind of figuring out, first geologically where those main areas of interest are, but then also through the course of the MVC surveys and the botanical recording, hopefully we'll be able to find out where those kind of key areas of base enrichment are. And then, yeah, jumping into ornithology, one of the biggest surveys we'll be doing is the upland wader survey. So we'll be just flooding the whole estate with monads to cover through the Brown and Shepherd method. In terms of existing data for upland waders, or just birds in general, a lot of the records are actually concentrated in Strathmore, because that's also just where the majority of people pass through and where the majority of people live. So there's not a lot of records for the remainder of the reserve, apart from some of the target survey work that was done for the hydro scheme. That was put in on Loch Roy in 2019, I believe it was finished. Yeah, and then hope as well is to, Loch Roy itself has not been covered previously as part of the Webb's count, so long term we'll be hoping to establish one of those as well when we have enough volunteers to cover it, because it's quite a hefty bit of survey work. Yeah, and again, these are some of the records that we have. As I said, a lot of them are primarily wintering records from the Broom Estuary. We don't have a lot of available breeding records apart from golden plover, which I suspect will be probably one of our most abundant breeders on site. And yeah, as Simon said, there has been records of green shank as well, breeding on Loch Roy that we're aware of. But yeah, so a lot of these have just been recorded in Strathmore, which actually the Broom Estuary itself is outside of our boundary, but we have a lot of areas of marshy grassland which are quite interesting for waders, which hopefully long term we'll be able to manage in that interest as well. Jumping into raptors. This is, I apologise for that. They are golden eagles, I promise you. This was taken through my scope at a 60x zoom, so hence the poor quality. But this is our resident pair of golden eagles. I've just been monitoring those over the past couple of weeks, and they have actually started building a brand new eyrie. But there's 2 known ones already, and they're building a brand new site just about 5 meters from the old one, because it's half collapsed. So, and they clearly like the spot. And yeah, in addition to golden eagle, I'll also be covering the reserve and some of the surrounding area as part of the RSPB's National Merlin Survey, because I'm also part of the Highland Raptor Study Group, so I'll be covering kind of a wider area beyond that. And also monitoring some historic peregrine falcon sites as well. Also in recent, the past couple of weeks, some of the residents have come forward with records of barn owl, which in the official records haven't been recorded since 2015, but all of the local residents are quite familiar with them. There was an S-box up previously on the site, but it was came down in a storm a few years ago, so we'll be looking to replace those as well.
Billy, can I jump in? Oh, you've got another slide on raptors. I was going to say that we've got exciting news this week about raptors moving to the west coast, so you might want to come.
Yeah, I've not included that in the table, but multiple people have picked up some red kite activity up in Strathmore, and I confirmed that there is actually a pair present. So hope is that they'll be breeding on site, and yeah, I've not seen them this far north before, and I think we suspect that they've, especially with all of the easterly winds that we've had, they've finally made that jump over the higher ground and have settled down in Strathmore. And I mean, there's plenty of good woodland for them to nest in, so my hope is that they'll set up shop this year. But in terms of other species, As I said, golden eagle and barn owl are the kind of the species that we have confirmed, but we've just, since having staff on site, we've already recorded white-tailed eagle, sparrowhawk. Some of these species like short-eared owl, long-eared owl, and osprey have just been recorded in one-off instances, likely wintering birds just passing through the area, and they tend to be more interested in East Ross rather than here in the west. And then beyond all of this, I'll also be doing some breeding bird transects, mainly in down in Strathmore. And my hope is as well that we'll be able to integrate some bioacoustic monitoring just to expand our database even further. It's quite a new area of monitoring, and obviously there are limitations with it in terms of the data it collects. But in terms of species diversity, it will just allow us to push the boat out a little bit further. And as I mentioned, we'll be undertaking black grouse and ptarmigan surveys. The Montane bird survey from the RSPB was carried out on the reserve last year in the Fanix, and they picked up some good numbers of ptarmigan up there, so I'm hoping to reconfirm them this year. And then there is a lot of diver interest on the site as well, as you saw in the photos. The peatlands are just absolutely covered in smaller lochans, and quite a few bigger ones as well. So yeah, my hope is that we'll pick up some good red-throated, black-throated diver numbers too. Jumping on to mammals, as I mentioned, we'll be undertaking, well, I say a collaborative project. The Mammal Society will probably be doing most of the work, but they're hoping to use Inverbroom as a pilot site for a small mammal monitoring project, specifically for testing new methods on small mammals, voles, mice, shrews and moles, because obviously these species tend to be underreported, or you know, doesn't tend to be a lot of focus on them, but obviously they are critical species in a lot of our food webs. And as Simon mentioned, for the surveys that were undertaken for the hydro scheme on Loch of Royan, there was a huge watervole population identified in 2017 with, I think they identified over 2,000 burrows on the site. So based on some very initial kind of spot checks up there with Matt from the Mammal Society, it looks like that number has decreased. So obviously in response to that, we'll also be hoping to do some mink monitoring to see if they're an issue on site. Based on initial indications and conversations with like residents and our stalker, there doesn't seem to have been any American mink present on the site, but obviously the number of watervole will have dropped for a reason, so it's just figuring that out really. And then beyond this, we'll also be carrying out otter, pine marten, badger, red squirrel, mountain hare and bat surveys. A lot of these will initially just start with presence-absence, many of which, I mean, I was out this morning with otter. We know they're using the River Broom and likely up the Coolig as well. And once we've kind of confirmed presence, we'll scale up from there for some more population monitoring. And then, yeah, in terms of the rivers themselves, we'll be bringing on Peter Cunningham from the West Ross Fisheries Trust, and he'll be doing a suite of electrofishing surveys for us on the Broom and the Coolig. Based on a few initial site visits with him, the Broom has one of the healthiest salmon populations in West Ross, despite its artificial kind of origins and the amount of engineering work that has been done on it over the years. It still supports quite a healthy salmon population, which is great for us. And then obviously off the back of that, we're hoping to do some freshwater pearl mussel surveys. There's no records, and given the amount of material and movement in the river, and especially because they have quite high spates as well, it's unlikely that we'll have any freshwater pearl mussel, but we'll be targeting the kind of larger pools beneath a series of waterfalls that go up the Coolig, because our hope is that the stability in those areas will hopefully have kept some remnant populations. And then to round all of this kind of together, we'll be carrying out a river habitat survey. one was carried out the previous one was carried out in 1998 as part of the 2003 fisheries management plan for the Broom, as Simon mentioned, and yeah, a lot of the recommendations that came out from that were for the estate previously, but a lot of that work wasn't actually done. So we'll be hoping to repeat that survey work to see what changes there's been since that 1998 baseline, and then go from there. And then invertebrate surveys, I've repeated myself here, but in addition to the freshwater pearl mussel, which we're actually hoping to be doing eDNA surveys for, just because they're invasive and they don't require a license. We'll be bringing on some local recorders from the British Dragonfly Society, and we'll be doing a whole suite of larval surveys on the bog pools, because there's quite a few that we've already found that are in good condition, but quite a few that aren't as well. So hopefully that will go a long way to informing habitat management from a peatland restoration perspective. And then we'll also have butterfly transects. Some local recorders have come forward to offer their services for moth trapping. And then as part of the river health survey, our hope is to also do some aquatic invertebrate sampling as well. But as I said, especially with invertebrates, this is not exhaustive, and we'd hope to scale up invertebrate surveys quite significantly, either this year or pushing into future years of the delivery phase. And then in terms of invasives, we have quite a few that have been recorded on the reserve, but thankfully not in high abundances. They tend to be quite localized, but I mean, I'm preempting that. I've obviously not actually done the surveys yet, so there may be way more than I think there actually is. The kind of main suspects are rhododendron, Japanese knotweed, giant hogweed, cotoneaster, and winter heliotrope. And there is also a lot of copper beech on the site as well, because it was a favourite of the previous landowner. So the site is just covered in copper beech, which is now encroaching into a lot of our native woodlands on the site. So this obviously will inform the kind of long-term management and removal plans that we have for these species on the site. And then in terms of our volunteer opportunities, I know it's perhaps a bit further afield for you, but we also will be paying for mileage. But in terms of the Auckland Wader surveys, I'm hoping that volunteers will be able to take on a couple of monads themselves to cover over the summer. We'll be hoping for 3 visits for each of those. And then, as I said, the amount of survey work that we have ongoing, this will be open to volunteers to get involved with as well, whatever their interest might be. But also, if any, when, as I said, we've already had many local experts and recorders come forward to offer their services. So the more that happens, the more we can expand our survey work. And yeah, fill those gaps with reptiles, amphibians, invertebrates, those species that we don't necessarily have capacity for this year, but hopefully with volunteer engagement we can do that. And my colleague Hannah, who's our Natural Heritage Officer, she'll be leading weekly practical reserve sessions focusing on path maintenance and other infrastructure related, and tree planting and things like that as well. So yeah, that's us.
Have we got any questions for any of the 3?
There may not be a simple answer, but what's the basic geology? What's the general geology of that area? Is it very varied, or where's the base rich stuff coming from?
It's not particularly varied, and it seems to be dominated by mostly acidic.
Yeah, it is almost, so the sanite type rocks. But I've got 2 theories on this. Well, there's one, I think you get this, just up there, the geology maps show a few small green bits which seem to be little basic intrusions on the hillside, but only one tiny area along there. And there are some flushes and springs that come out of the hillside there, but all along the hillside, either the geology maps are wrong, which I don't think it is, but there's loads of them all the way along, and then the bits on the top of the Munros, just trying to think what's up there. I'm not sure I've looked at the geology map recently. I don't think it looks different again up there, but there's obviously springs that are coming out the top of the cliffs there that are very different. So there's probably something coming from deep underground up there that isn't whatever the surface geology is. I don't really understand it, but the majority of it, I would say, is glacial till that's on the surface. That's got some clay in it. That's I think the water's just coming up through that and running down through that. In a lot of the gorges, there's lots of loose ground with quite a lot of till all across the ledges in it.
Are you on the Moyne or what? What's the basic? Or the Lewisian or what?
It's not. I'll have to confess that having just moved to the area, all the stuff on the geology map is stuff that I have not experienced anywhere I've lived before, so I'm not an expert in it.
I think it is mostly schist, isn't it? Moyne schist.
So what kind of gear density are you experiencing, and do you presume that it's way too high, or it's where you want it, or?
You're a week too early, I think, probably. Would that be fair to say, Ali, in terms of getting an answer to that?
Yeah, we've just had thermal drone survey last week, so we're just waiting for the results of that to come through. But I think, yeah, I think the deer density needs to come down, certainly. So, yeah. So it'll be a combination of using, obviously, the thermal drone, but also the HIA that Billy's described to kind of get a sort of a plan put together. Well, in fact, Simon mentioned that was one of the outputs for this next sort of 6 months, really, in terms of producing a deer management plan for the next few years. So, and we're also part of West Ross Deer Management Group as well. So, yeah, there's sort of kind of work to do around that whole sort of deer management side.
And do you expect conflict with your neighbours, or what kind of marginal objectives do your neighbours have, and how easy would it be to combine that with yours?
Multiple different.
Yes, I think sort of kind of some sort of traditional sporting still, others you know, are on sort of kind of lower deer density ambitions. So there's a real mix, as I think there are in most deer management groups. So yeah.
Have you got records from the previous owners of their deer take in terms of stag signs, calves, etc.? Was it really active, or?
I think so. I forget that when they had the sales particulars, what they sort of said would be the figures there. So I've slipped my mind, but basically. It was a small, given the size of the estate, the numbers, the cull wasn't actually that high in terms of previous management. So yeah, we in this last, as Simon said, we have our one deer stalker who's been on the estate for I'm going to say sort of 10 years,
15, I think.
15 years. So yes, so he had a sort of fairly kind of traditional role in under the previous sort of ownership. We're sort of taking out sort of you know, paying guests and fishing and that sort of thing. So so now, you know, obviously kind of sort of fitting in with our ambitions as well. And so this last year we have sort of increased the cull. But yeah, it's really, we're basically trying not to jump ahead of the evidence. And I think it's giving us time to just kind of assess what condition things are in and get a better understanding of numbers and movements and how the population relates to adjoining land as well. So deer management's a very sort of complex area, as you know.
We've been focusing on, I suppose this last year we've focused on the woodland areas where we have grant schemes that we've got for creating woodland and ensuring that those areas are kept free of deer, and we've been focusing on the peatland restoration area as well that we've got coming up.
We do have about 3 years worth of herbivore impact assessment data from the previous owner. That was first carried out in 2014, and that supposedly showed low impacts of the deer, but as when it was then repeated in 2018 and 2021, has shown a steady increase, and likelihood is that increase has continued. But as Abi said, I'll be carrying out the Hope for Impact assessments this year, and then in addition to the thermal drone surveys, that will kind of concretise everything we need to then properly inform the day management moving forward.
Interested in your plant list, because there's a number of species there which don't extend further north. You've got Kerrick, Saxatilis, Kerrick, Castaneus, etc. And we don't have downy willow anymore, if we ever had it, etc. Until we get right up to places like Ben Hope. It's quite interesting to
Is that associated with
there's a bit of
geology?
land between you and our southern boundary in essence. So it's not that surprising.
I'd say there's probably some better geology in Asset that would probably think might do better for some of those willows, because they like, I think they prefer limestones, most of them, although the downy willow's less fussy.
Do you still have tenant farmers as well there? And
We have contract farmers, which is
All right,
slightly
okay.
unusual.
Right.
So we've inherited that. Yeah. So there's two, yes, there's two farming families who've been there a long, long time.
Right, okay. Yeah. And what's I'm trying to think about your income, so you'll be letting out some of the cottages and things like that, and you've got fishing rights as well, so that could be income, or
Possibly. It was used as I guess as a sporting estate. People were paying for fishing in the past, which we're not doing. We're not making any decisions on what we're doing until we've got better assessment of the fish populations, basically, is what we're saying at the moment. But, yeah.
Since most sporting estates up here run at a loss, how are you going to? I mean, how are you going to get positive funding out of this, or is it coming from other parts of SWT? I mean, are you going to have to fund this estate, not for the special jobs like the 700,000, but actually to keep it running? That's a rather leading question, I know, but I mean, you must have looked at the overall question of funding.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, to be perfectly honest, that sort of, we're sort of very much on the operation side, and the sort of the sort of funding, long-term sort of funding sustainability side is done by other very kind of specialist sort of people. But yeah, I think there is a model in terms of sort of a kind of sort of self-funding sort of model. But obviously, you know, it's basically trying to, the property appraisals is one sort of small element of that. So looking at the assets that are on the estate, so the lodge being one, you know, and a lot of work's been going on at the lodge in the last few months to get that ready for letting. But the actual kind of properties appraisals, so that's like a really very seen as a kind of like a sort of a, you know, not short-term sort of kind of rollout, I guess. But the property appraisals is looking at all that to see what the options might be, and you know, and how that kind of like links in with the financial sustainability, but links in with the Wildlife Trust sort of ambitions for, you know, sort of nature conservation as well, to see what might be possible. So there's a lot of work to go to be done in all sort of facets of the estate, to be fair. So.
But the SWT must have looked at it and said, we can afford to run it.
Yeah.
Presumably, there's a positive.
Indeed, well, I guess when that happened it was probably before all of us started.
Yes,
So the
yeah,
details
okay.
of that
Okay.
would have been done before. So perhaps the people to ask those questions to aren't here. But obviously, yes, as Abi says, there's people in our senior management who are involved in some of that side. Obviously, it's key to them to see that we don't.
I mean, this has been a problem up here with the Asset Foundation land, 25 years without an adequate income in effect until very recently. Partnership with the Woodland Trust.
Yeah. So I think I guess there's acute awareness of that. And that we're being left to do the nature reserve management, as it were. Whereas, yes.
Any other questions?
None of that's under crofting tenure, is it? None of this they've talked. Right.
The crofters are all further down on one side.
So on Lincoln Ullapool, I mean, you are guaranteed to have some mink presence around on the island. They were losing them down. West Fisheries Trust kind of fell apart in terms of mink management 4 years ago, and things have been picked up now by another group.
Yeah.
So there has been ups and downs. So I would definitely have no comfort from absence of mink in recent years.
There has been ongoing monitoring on Loch Broom for the past few years.
From City, which I'm part of.
Which hasn't identified any American mink.
That's because they've got the actual further south of you, but you are just still on the edge of the invasion front.
Yeah, I mean,
critically placed.
especially with the waterfowl interest on the site, we absolutely will be doing American mink monitoring as well.
Are your red squirrels up from Dundon?
We found some evidence of them on the site so far.
They can't be very far away because
Yeah,
they've reintroduced to Dundon.
Exactly.
They got to Ullapool, didn't they?
They are, so they're in, so on the other side of the broom from us, that steep woodland all along Inverbroom, that's, there's either side of the estate, in that woodland, there are red squirrels. There's been very little sign of them on our land, but as the woodland develops, there will be more. A lot of the trees are pretty young and not huge amounts of seed source in there at the moment.
Well, if there's no more questions, I want to thank you very much, all three of you, for coming along. So it's been a great evening. You've got a huge amount of work ahead of you. I just see that and go, oh my goodness. But it's very exciting to be in the beginning of that, and I just wish it was a wee bit nearer. So you might get one or two volunteers from the audience here. But thank you very much, and we'll have to invite you back in a year or so time, and you can tell us all the things you found. But thanks for coming for tonight.
Thank you very much.